Hey guys, the tactics video for this week I'm going to call the bait and switch. And I looked it up online to make sure I was naming it correctly. Got a lot of stuff on advertising and unethical business practices, but was able to find that initially it was a military tactic because I'd heard it used in many forms of games I've played or in conversation, and I thought, no, I think I'm doing this in the games that I play. So you might have been following the channel, and I've had a sort of on and off go with Beastmen. I've painted a huge amount of Beastmen using contrasts over the last sort of 4 or 5, maybe 6 months. And with the new Arcane Journal, wanted to really take them and particularly the Herdstone to a tournament that was played on the weekend. So got a first look at them. And in this game, the battle report will come out later in the week. And there you might see me using a Herdstone and claiming a victory. But I think throughout the day, I wanted to sort of highlight some of the features of the Beastman army, particularly that might be more generalizable to other armies, that combine some of the basic tactics we've used into a more sort of strategic play in general, and something that I think could elevate, particularly if you're playing like a combat army, the way you play that in a type of format that I think probably privileges the sort of keep away points denial type armies at the moment. So if you're familiar with Beastmen, two of the great core units are Razor Gores, which are, I think, point for point, one of the best core units in the game, and Tuskor Chariots, which are rare to get a heavy chariot in core, but for 85 points are quite well costed as well. So Beastmen are pretty spoilt for core choices. They've got Chaos Warhounds, which are great, but are not as great as Razor Gores, and Gores themselves are pretty good as well. So Ungors are not terrible either, but Gores are pretty good, and there's just not a lot of room because you really want to probably take as many Razor Gores as you can get. And while I and ah sometimes about taking Tuskor Chariots after this tournament, I was pretty confident that they have a central role in the army. So what I'm going to sort of describe is if you look on the left, the way I tend to deploy is I put my Razor Gores down first, which are sort of chaff, and you've seen videos that I've made on redirection with Razor Gores because they threaten enough and they have Swift Stride that your opponent sort of has to deal with them, but at the same time, they are cheap enough that you can sort of throw them away in the aim of a greater good, and that might come through in some of the tactics videos that I do from rounds 2 and 3 of this tournament. But I tend to run them on the extreme flanks with a Tuskor Chariot. So you can see on the left side, I've got the Razor Gore and the Chariot angled slightly into the center, and that's because when you are riding the sideline, you don't want to be pushed over the edge. So you're going to want to wheel back to the center if your opponent doesn't deploy over there. And if you start perpendicular to the board edge, you're going to find that you run out of room a lot more quickly. In this case, on the other side, you can see there's a Razor Gore and Chariot. So the Razor Gore rides the inside and the Chariot rides the outside. So the aim you're going to see in some of the shots is that the Razor Gore will march right ahead, like the full boat. And what it's going to try to do is get into charge range of one of these units, but also be able to charge itself. So with move 7 Swift Stride, you're probably looking at 7, so maximum charge range of 16, and I think you should probably go for it every time. So the issue here is that even if it fails a charge, it's going to end up in front of them. But if you pull it off, you've got your impact hits. You might roll Primal Fury. If you get up Primal Fury, you've got Foe Render up as well on your 4 attacks that are coming in at Strength 5, and you're getting -1 on the boat because you've charged. Like the charge is so dangerous. Then underneath that, the aim is for it to clog up anyway. So typically, your opponent's not just going to stand there and let you have it. What's going to happen is they're going to want to charge you. In this instance, my opponent has Vargheists who are frenzied, so this was an easy pick for me. But I do this a lot of the time with even a unit like these Black Knights. It can just, even if I charge it, yeah, sure, they might win. They might not win straight away though. And then they might, if I'm going straight ahead, have to overrun in that way straight forward if they want. So that can be pretty painful for them as well, and not what they want to do, and waste a couple of turns. And as we speak in later videos, we'll probably talk about how chaff, it's not about what you kill, it's about the time you buy with chaff for other things to kill. So it's important to see that Razor Gore has marched and wheeled its way into the middle. And what it's then positioned itself to be charged, charge or be charged next turn. The Tuskor trails behind. So the important thing with the Tuskor is that we know that chariots are useless if they get charged, but they're devastating if they can pull off the charge. The Tuskor being a heavy chariot and having D6 +1 impact hits is very reliable. So what you're trying to do is they're going to come forward and I'm going to flee with this Razor Gore and the Tuskor is going to charge that zone. So you sort of want to know that your Tuskor can hit that area, but you don't want to be within the charge range of the unit itself. It seems finicky, but this is sort of the skill in the game, and especially if you're playing sort of combat units, you need to get used to these staggered sort of attacks where you're zoning parts of the board because your opponent will just skip and move away otherwise, particularly if they're a mobile army like elves or something like that. You need to be able to threaten space and make your opponent make bad decisions. So in this case, the Razor Gore runs out in front, the Tuskor trails behind, ready to hit what happens next. So on the right, the Vargheists have to charge. They come forward, their charge roll, which obviously wasn't massive in this instance. They couldn't fly because they had the no fly banner go off on the first turn, and the Razor Gore runs away. So even in this instance, you can sort of decide you're not going to use the swift stride. So a key element here, I've had to flee into dangerous terrain. I've taken a wound, you can see from that one dice from the cover. But from now on, I just choose not to use swift stride. And I'm just rolling that 2d6. So it's going to give me a number of turns. Like I'm probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the way across the board. It's going to give me a number of turns to rally that Razor Gore and save its points. So I might in a typical game have 3 or 4 chances to roll on that leadership 6, and it feels like more often than not that I'm able to get it off. So in this case, the Razor Gore flees. You can see probably here that that looks like a pretty serviceable distance. I think it was 10 inches in the end. And my Tuskor is able to get in. The Tuskor then smashes into these Vargheists. So it's a 190 point Vargheist unit. If you count up the Razor Gore, which ends up surviving at the end of the game after failing 2 rally tests, but then passing the last one, that Tuskor's 85 points. I barrel in, I think I get off 4 wounds, and with Indomitable is left with 1 Vargheist and 1 who's quite wounded. Might have been 3 wounds in this case, which is a sort of below average roll. But on top of that, what's happening is on that flank, the Vargheists are being distracted. It allows my spawn to get into position unobstructed. They're bogged down in this combat here. And in the scenario we're playing also, that there's a tower that as monstrous infantry they could take that they're prevented from getting access to. On the right, you can see as the game progresses, the Tuskor chariots actually survives for a while, which after I probably was unlucky. My opponent was a little bit unlucky in not being able to deal enough damage to kill it, but it bogged down that left flank. And in this game, my opponent had put more resources into his right flank or my left flank. And on my left, I had used a Tuskor, a Razor Gore, pretty much by themselves to buy the time for this giant spawn to trundle over, who was then able to beat a bigger unit on the right. And between them, for about 300 points, I had been able to sort of take down about 500 points, or at least stop 500, maybe even 600 points on that side of the board from doing anything at all in the game. So you call it the bait, the Razor Gore's the bait, and then it's the switch that it's charge or be charged. And then if you try to do anything about it, the Tuskor is going to hit you and the switch is on and you're getting D6 +1, strength 5 -2 AP hits, +4 attacks of varying quality from the top. So I hope you like it. I think sometimes we do a lot with what's happening in the middle of the board and the big features in this format, but there are a lot of edges you can get on the wings. And if you can win those sorts of battles, they can take the pressure off some of your bigger pieces who can go about winning the game for you in a more decisive fashion. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.